panel. Right. So, Sng Seow Wah, Executive Vice President at Fullerton Financial, which is a subsidiary of Temasek, and he will be talking to us about some of their work in the underbanked world.
Yes. Good afternoon, or rather I should say good evening. I'm still jet-lagged from the flight here. What I'm going to talk to you about today is quite different from the mainstream that we have heard so far. So far it's been pretty macro. I'm going to go down to what is done on the ground. But before I start my presentation, let me just give you a little background about Fullerton Financial Holdings. Fullerton was built or established 5 years ago because there was a vision at our parent company level that we would like to play into, to invest in countries that are transforming economies. And by that, when you look at Asia as a whole, the transforming economies will typically come from the emerging countries that are very populous, with a growing population and fast-changing demographics. The second thing I'd like to just give you as a matter of a prelude before I go to the presentation is that this space that Fullerton plays into as a business is quite different from mainstream banking as we know it. Most of the global banks that you think of would typically be dealing with what I'd say the top 10% of the universe there is for banking, and this would be the large corporates, the high net worth individuals, the global multinationals, and so on and so forth. While it's only 10% space in numbers, it produces incredible profits so far for them. But what is left largely untapped has been this area that we call the self-employed mass market. So with that in mind, I'd like to start the presentation. The emerging markets are typically characterized by a few things. First, they have large populations. There's a very strong, pervasive informality of labor market and the way the financial services are being intermediated. Sorry, can I have the hyperlink slide, please? Okay, so it's on. Now, what I'm trying to establish here is that for every country that we've gone to, and every survey we do before we go into a country to do this business, it always comes down to something very fundamental, is that in this area of business, some people will call it microfinancing. There's a very low number of these companies who actually go to financial institutions and banks to actually borrow money or tap on the financial services available. Most of them actually rely on very informal ways of raising finance. Some will go as desperately as to rely on credit card financings. And you know, credit card financings are typically quite expensive. Most would rely on relatives and other informal channels. Back. And there's another feature that I'd like to raise, and that is that in the emerging countries, there's something that's very fundamentally different, is that there's a very strong culture for entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. In here, there are some numbers. I hope you can see them. But if you can't, I'll just quickly let you have a snapshot of this. Is that in places like Mexico, Malaysia, Russia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and China, you can easily say that about in excess of 90% of the businesses that are in those countries are in the self-employed mass market. What we found dealing with this segment of the business is that their needs are largely not met. They have a problem with dealing with the banks. They feel that the banks do not, or other financial services companies, they do not understand their needs. They feel intimidated. They feel that there's a lack of respect whenever they go to one of these institutions to tap on the services. And in this space globally, what surprised us 5 years ago when we actually stepped into this arena is that there are very, very few global players. The few global players left are actually Citi Financial, GE Money, and so on. But these are all in various stages of some would call unwind due to the credit crisis. So this area of financing and this area of financial services has been largely left to very indigenous local players, many of them which are shown here. And what surprised us when we went into this area was that the largest player in the world today is a bank in Indonesia called Bank Rakyat Indonesia, is BRI, and it's possibly the only institution in the world in this market that makes money and that comes back with a respectable ROE. The rest typically don't make very much money, neither do they have a high ROE. Why have banks not been able to cover this area sufficiently? A couple of reasons. I'll just summarize it quickly for you. One is this sort of business typically is very small ticket, very widespread. You need very efficient. You could be very ruthlessly efficient, and very lean cost, and you got to have very good distribution system because the businesses are often very widespread. And the second thing is there is a very strong presumption of the fact that this is a highly credit-intensive business. It doesn't have to if one understands the business segment well. Again, this is just trying to explain to you again that the customers do feel underserved in this area. Now, we said breakthrough innovation in this segment. It doesn't have to be very complicated. We took many learnings from actually the fast-moving consumer goods organizations. And if we were to go back, say, last 20, 30 years, the people who've been able to sell products effectively and make money out of it to this segment have been the FMCG companies. And we took many learnings from them when we designed our model. It first starts with a very deep understanding of the country, the demographics, the way the businesses operate, how widespread they are, where are the concentrations, and so on and so forth. And there's a certain method about doing this for every country that we've gone to. As a result, what we did was really build a very, very customer-centric business model. It is hard to imagine that when you're dealing with this very small businessman that you can become customer-centric, but it can be done if one understands the market well. So what we've done is we've attempted to build very lean branches. Typically, if you go to a bank, the bank branches are very expensive branches. They've got heavy platforms. They've got strong IT and so on and so forth. For us, the branches can be as small as 3 persons, can be as large as 8 persons, with a couple of computers, and all the transactions that we process through with the customers are straight through. People that we hire are people from the communities. We don't bring in our own people to run the business. It is through that you get yourself fully embedded into the local business arena that we want to be. And what is often neglected or not emphasized is the need to serve the community. We took a very strong lesson during the 1998 crisis, especially in Indonesia. We're very close neighbors to Indonesia, and we still got very strong memories of what went wrong, the riots that took place, the factories, the commercial places that were burned down by the rioters. And those that were left standing and unaffected were the very businessmen or the owners who actually invested in the community. So in this regard, for this business, it is essential that one pays attention to the community, and community work goes hand in hand with our mission and our aspiration. Risk management. This is the most important piece to it. These customers need to be closely monitored, watched, and collection is an important part. But I don't think I have time to describe to you the overall framework, but just to give you a sense of what takes place. Every time we go, we establish ourselves a branch at a particular place where there's a concentration of small businesses. Our people are in the field every day. I mean, every day as in making sales calls, and there's always somebody who comes along and he's also doing collections, and collections are done daily. So before the customer uses the money and reinvests in his inventories and other things, we would typically meet him on the day and establish a collection process. And the collection process is a very efficient process. Right on the ground, money is collected, cash is collected, and is processed on the spot using remote electronic devices that go straight through right to our factory in the background. Again, like I mentioned, the need to be lean on the ground as well as an organization is very essential, because these are very, very low ticket, small ticket items. So as a summary to it, I'd just like to say that we think that this is possibly the last financial frontier left in Asia. The large corporates, the middle corporates are very well served by the indigenous local banks as well as the global banks. But this is an area that has not been covered, and this is an area, if one covers it well, can also bring a great deal of value to the businessmen who own the businesses. But what is most essential, which is something that most, I think, global banks are not able to deal with, is a long gestation period of this sort of a project. A typical project, when we go greenfield and build from the ground, we did this in India 2.5 years, no, I think it's less than 2.5 years, about 26 months ago. We built an organization that came up to about 13,000 people with 800 over branches. It broke even just a couple of months ago. So not many banks can actually have this sort of a long-term outlook where you put money up front, heavy infrastructure costs, and it takes about 2 to 3 years to break even, and you start to make money over time. So just as a concluding remark, this area of business that we're in, I think is an interesting area in the emerging markets, and requires a very patient and long-term player as a shareholder. Thank you.
Seow-Wah, thank you.